Welcome back to the 1% Insight. It's brilliant to be joined today by a fellow West Cork man, Gearoid Buckley. Gearoid is an international B2B marketing leader with over 15 years' experience driving growth for global SaaS and tech brands. Most notably, his career at LinkedIn, where he played huge roles in developing LinkedIn's global demand engine and their international growth. Welcome to the podcast, Gearoid.
Thanks for having me, Jack. Great to be two West Corkonians on together. Thank you.
Yeah, who would have thought in terms of the B2B tech marketing landscape in West Cork? You never thought they'd go together, but here we are.
It's all happening here. As soon as we got the broadband, things kicked off.
Delighted to have you on today, Gearoid, and I'm looking forward to kind of deep diving into your career and insights on B2B tech marketing, content marketing, and demand generation. So I guess for listeners, and I guess we actually both went to CIT, now MTU Cork, to study as well. So the similarities don't just stop there. But I'd love to kind of get your insight into how you got into B2B marketing.
I've always had an interest in marketing in school. I used to love the case studies, in business studies in school, books as well about from business leaders when I was younger. And I just love the human aspect of it, like someone an entrepreneur could take something and grow it. Marketing always appealed to me. And then, funnily enough, when I was in maybe fifth year, I did an online survey to see what my career would be when I'm older. And it said marketing executive. And it said at the bottom of the profile, it said, this person will earn £70,000 or euros, whatever it was. And I was like, wow, I'm going to be a marketing executive. So it set me up in mind pretty quickly. But I really enjoyed that part of my studies anyway. So I applied for business studies in both CIT or MTU now, as it's known, and UL. And funnily enough, I got offered both. And I'm not sure if you know Maurice Murphy. He's a lecturer in MTU. But Maurice Murphy had come to our secondary school, telling us about the course and so on, and we should apply for it. And then the week I had to make up my mind of which course I would select, I met Maurice Murphy outside the chip shop at around 2 a.m. in Clonakilty. And I was leaning towards UL, but after that conversation, I was sold on MTU. And it was probably one of the best decisions I ever made in my life because the staff, the culture, the people there are just, as you know yourself, Jack, it's a really fantastic place to study. I studied marketing there, and I was very fortunate afterwards to get a role with Carberry Plastics. I left MTU in 2009. It was the height of the recession at the time, and I managed to get a role, as I said, with Carberry Plastics. And they're a company, if people are not familiar with, they're based in West Cork, but they're renowned for making high quality Irish made oil tanks. And if you're driving down the road, probably anywhere in Ireland or probably also in the UK, and you see red and white road barriers during construction, they're also manufacture most of those as well. But I joined a company just as the construction sector was nosediving. And it was really exciting, actually. It was very challenging in the sense that people were, hours were cut for the people working in the factory and so on. But it was also very exciting because, I was there, a young marketer, charged with like rethinking how we go to market. Our current market that we had during the Celtic Tiger had now gone. And we had to rethink about which markets do we go after in Europe and the UK. And it was really, really cool and exciting. So very privileged to have that opportunity. I did a year and a bit in Carberry Plastics, and then I moved a couple of miles away to a company called PGI, also based in Clonakilty. We're now talking on a video call, but before video, obviously there was audio conferencing, and the company I worked for then was PGI. And 90% of audio conferencing probably took place on PGI's infrastructure. They were market leading company globally. Again, I learned a lot there, and I joined PGI just at the right time as well, because they were now evolving into video conferencing. And it was a net new space for them as well. So when I joined PGI, I got an opportunity to really work on launching new products. And yeah, a very exciting time to be with them. This is all coinciding. I was also mayor of my hometown in Bandon. And when my term came up in local politics, my time was up in 2014. I wanted to kind of spend some time away from Cork for a while because I could. a lot of my friends had traveled. I didn't travel because I was in local politics and I was working locally. So I took up a maternity leave cover 11-month contract at LinkedIn, and that was employee number 4 in the LinkedIn ads marketing team. And yeah, I was there for 11 years. They found it very hard to get rid of me, but yeah, it was really, really great opportunity. I came in at the right time. We got a chance to build so much stuff, try loads of stuff. Some things didn't work out as we would like to, but it was a great time to just jump into the deep end and really kind of grow a really cool brand. And also, one of the unique things about LinkedIn was I was targeting marketers with my marketing. So on one level, it's a high bar, but on another level, it's really easy because you're targeting yourself. So that was kind of a really unique experience. So yeah, I really enjoyed my time at LinkedIn as well.
LinkedIn, because it's such a huge platform now for people listening as well, like in terms of the B2B landscape, for B2B marketers, from a social point of view, from a paid ads point of view, from a visibility point of view. How did that kind of role evolve? Because you were director for international growth, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And in many respects, like I suppose, like all startups and smaller companies, my role evolved as the company evolves. When I came in first, my first week, I was told to manage the website and the blog. The second week, I was creating ebooks, and third week, we were doing webinars. So like my role evolved. Like in my first 6 months, I put together a business case for $5,000 investment in Google AdWords, and I bought a book on Amazon on how to do Google AdWords, a big thick book. It's probably still inside in the house. And by the end of the year, that $5,000 budget was now $1 million budget. And within 3 years, it was $20 million budget, because we were able to kind of try something, prove that return on investment, and then increase the investment there. And I suppose that was I was very fortunate to be early in the team to be able to try these things, and then as my remit grew, I was also able to grow my team and so on. And I've met some incredible people. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jason Miller, content B2B content marketer, Supremer, and I learned so much from him in terms of creativity and really pushing the boundaries of what marketing can be. And I think, yeah, certainly just very fortunate to be in that position.
That's fantastic. And I think you actually will give a really interesting insight, Garrod, to our listeners, because usually when we're speaking from a point of view of tech companies, and they're in-house in a tech company and they're selling to perhaps people in logistics or operations or whoever else that might be, or CFOs and financial teams. But it'd be really interesting to get your perspective on selling to marketers. So marketer to marketer relationship, and how you're kind of like engaging them, and what worked well, or was there certain challenges that you faced in trying to speak to them? Because sometimes we know, let's say, the tricks of the trade perhaps,
Mm.
and there might be other ways that you have to go around things to actually communicate effectively with marketers. So how did you find that throughout your career in terms of marketing to marketers?
Well, I suppose in many respects, as I said earlier, you're kind of marketing to yourself. So I used to always like invest in a lot of content around, A/B testing and research and results, stuff I like to consume. But I do know that other people in LinkedIn marketing team who are a lot more creative than I am would do a lot of kind of humor, and they would deploy really like a. I'm not sure if you recall Bandersnatch a couple of years ago on Netflix, where you choose your own adventure on the Netflix show. A really creative marketer, Grace MacDonald, she created a video for LinkedIn ads on the same idea, whereby you're going through a journey of LinkedIn ads, deciding what product is for you and so on. And it's the same idea. You choose your own adventure. And I think the idea of like pushing the boundary is something we were inspired to do by in the business, because you're always trying to like be creative as you can. But certainly there are challenges, but I think the challenges that we have are probably similar to all companies. I think there's probably two challenges that come to mind. The first one is that we can sometimes be very inclusive looking, in the sense of, this is our product. We know our audience, so we're going to tell them what they want, as opposed to asking them what they want and then providing value. A large part of my job was actually acquiring new customers, and we invested a lot of money and time in getting customers to click an ad to go on to serve to start creating ads on LinkedIn. And our campaigns were performing extremely well in terms of, click-through rate, in terms of people converting on our landing pages. They were outperforming like benchmarks. They were really, really powerful. But what we didn't understand why revenue wasn't coming in. Like people, obviously there was intent there. People wanted to buy our products, but they weren't actually putting ads live afterwards. And instead of actually asking our customers why they're not spending money, we kept trying to optimize the campaign and our messaging that we had, because we felt the messaging is working. We just need to make it a bit better. But after a while, we actually spoke to our customer prospects and said, I see that the 5 of you people have clicked get started, but you actually haven't put an ad live. And when they told us quite clearly, we wanted to start, but we can't use your product. So very much, I think that that's an issue that companies has, is that sometimes they don't understand what the value they need to deliver is. And actually, when that penny dropped for me, we totally transformed our messaging in the market. We started hiring life cycle marketers, starting to invest in webinars for customers and so on, to really drive that kind of messaging. And it transformed how we think about our content marketing. So understanding your customers is a key challenge that it's fundamentally easy, but always overlooked, especially by the shiny idea of doing cool marketing. Let's forget about the basic stuff we need to do. The second thing I think is, in a company like LinkedIn, like many companies I think are similar, where there's high growth and there's lots of people involved. You have lots of people running and racing and doing really cool stuff. And it's very hard to connect the dots sometimes between everyone, because salespeople are saying this to the prospect, marketing is saying this, and customer service is saying that. But sometimes we're saying the different thing to the exact same person at the exact same time. So I think that's something that we also worked on, was when we realized that, we're not being very clear we're all saying really cool stuff, but we're not being very clear to our prospects and our customers. So that's when we, hired. I remember we worked at Trina Copeland, another Cork marketer, actually, really incredible marketer. She looked at what everyone was saying across our messaging framework, our content, and said, okay, sales is saying this, and this is actually working better at this stage of the funnel. So all the rest of the channel should say the same thing. And the marketing is saying this in the middle of the funnel. It's working better than the other channels, and so on and so on. And then over time, optimizing that messaging. And that really was a big unlock as well, because earlier in my time at LinkedIn, in marketing, we would hire a new person in the team and they would do more stuff as well. And it just became very much an engine of like lots of content and lots of messages. And once we start tidying that up and it linked back to what customers actually needed, we started to really scale the engine.
A lot of people listening will be maybe in-house in a B2B tech marketing team. They might be looking at this, and those are great insights in terms of go out and speak to your customers and understand them, and also refine the messaging and keep refining until you find what is working with them. So speaking on that, Garo, because I think you have a lot of expertise to share with these listeners. If you were developing a kind of a go-to-market, content plan or marketing strategy, for example, for a tech company in 2025 and beyond, what insights or foundational building blocks would you share with the tech teams listening today?
There's probably a number of things I could say. The first thing I think is you need to understand your strategy. It's so, so important. I think I remember I was a young marketer and I got into a room and I invited people from my team to have a conversation around, let's do a campaign. I didn't know why I wanted to do a campaign, but it was that time of the quarter. We had to get planning for next quarter. And I look back now and I was naive. We probably did a really cool campaign, but it wasn't tied to a very clear strategy. And that's like, I think I've learned, especially as over the last couple of years, the markets have been more challenging, and we've really had to be very clean and clear and tight on our messaging. Who do we want to target? Where's our product market fit? Very, very clear, because that's really, really essential. And the most important part of a good strategy, I believe, is identifying what you're not doing. So I think it's very easy. Everyone puts strategy on paper and it looks really good, but then we go off and do other things. So it's really important that you also clarify, this is what we're not doing. And then the hard part is sharing that list of things you're not doing with everyone, all your stakeholders, and saying, to do this, we can't do that. And that's just the reality of it. Another piece will be contextualize your measurement. And I say that in the sense that very often a campaign could perform very, very well. And it could really good top of funnel metrics like click through rate and so on. But then you may not see the revenue come in, and you're talking about top of funnel metrics, or it could be even more drastic than that, whereby you know the revenue from marketing this year grew 50% year over year. That's an incredible story. But the context that's missing in that stat is that, the market grew 200%, but we only grew 50%. So, there's a question about then, is it because marketing didn't have enough budget? Is it because our campaigns could work harder and so on? Or it could be the opposite, whereby, our campaigns grew 50%, but our competitors only grew 10%. And then that's a really good story as well. So I think contextualizing your performance is really, really important in a measurement of that, because stats on their own, or data on their own, is only you need to understand the full picture.
It's a really interesting point, actually, in terms of the measurement, because I think that's something that, as marketers, especially more the creative side of B2B marketing,
Mm.
will struggle more so with the measurement, the mathematics behind it, the data, and obviously data can become very siloed in today's world, where things are just in separate, Google Sheets, or they're in your CRM, and somewhere else is in an Excel sheet, and you've all this distributed data that isn't necessarily making any sense in one clear picture. Do you have any tips, or from your experience, in terms of like measurement for either marketing campaigns or like marketing as a whole, in terms of just a kind of a very clear roadmap of how you should be measuring certain activities and reporting to C-suite?
We could probably have like 6 hours alone on measurement, I think. But I suppose how, and like the contextual piece, how I put that into practice is with the scorecard mentality. So, like, for most of my marketing career, I have had a target, normally last click, attribution, and so on. But the problem with that is that you're losing the wider context, as I said earlier. But by having, like, and you mentioned, people who work in creative or brand marketing, how does that relate to the scorecard? Well, in my scorecard I would have on top of the funnel metrics such as, uh, you know, if we're investing in top of funnel channels, we should have a target for that. And the target would be, are we increasing brand awareness? Are we improving consideration, wherever those targets are? And then in that part of the scorecard, top of the funnel, the KPI is consideration and brand awareness. And then as we work through the funnel, you're looking at retargeting, audience size, lists, and so on, and different kind of KPIs at different channels, until you get to the bottom, which is revenue. It's a different narrative than just saying that, oh, we smashed our brand goals, or that we did brand marketing, so we can't measure it. That's not the whole picture here. The investment that we're making in brand now sets us up so when the market does improve, we're in a market leadership position, and that's the key output for leadership.
Even if you're going through that measurement piece, Garo, because I find it myself very interesting as well, like from top to bottom, and like how would you start in terms of like that mind share? Like, how are brands attributing or collecting the data or measuring it to showcase this is our brand awareness? Obviously, you have the social metrics in terms of impressions, awareness, interactions, and the basic level social. Is there anything else that you found that was working well in terms of calculating that mind share?
Well, like, I think I'm very fortunate that I know I'm coming from a tech company where we could afford to use, Kantar studies or Ipsos MRBI studies, and that gives us that information. We can ask specific questions to our target audience. But there are a lot of free tools you can use online that you can get similar kind of answers. And I think as well AI as well, it's helping quite a lot. We would do a Kantar study once a year, but during the year we would have our brand lift studies from our specific channels, so from Meta, from LinkedIn, and so on. So we'd have the channel level studies during the year, but generally, yeah, I know we're coming from a fortunate position, but there are some tools out there now that do help people get some of those answers.
And as they move through the funnel approach, I suppose, into
Mm.
that kind of maybe consideration stage, the kind of halfway point of their B2B buyer's journey, how are you kind of measuring that before it gets into, obviously, result and action, and, it's leading to revenue then? Is there a middle part of it? And I know standardized to say this because every company is different and they have different sales cycles and products and buying committees and all that good stuff. But if you were kind of looking at that middle piece, is there particular destinations that you're tracking in terms of how they went from social to the website, and to try and paint that picture of their journey, so you have visibility on that.
So, for example, if people take a certain action, then they fall into audience A, and they'll start receiving audience A messaging. And as they engage more with our marketing, they will receive different messaging and so on through the funnel.
The main takeaway there is you need to be measuring it, because if it doesn't get measured, you can't improve it and you can't take action then. Same as your sales. Marketing falls into the same bracket in terms of the measurement is a huge piece to it.
Interesting stat for you as well. So we started investing a lot recently in incrementality testing and media mix modeling, and it's been mind blowing in terms of what we learn about what we're doing. And obviously, I know for a long time that search engine marketing is very, it's taking credit for things it probably shouldn't be getting credit for, because it's a last click, and if people are using last click. With things like podcast ads or even your podcast now, people can click this podcast. They might have a link in this bio or whatever, but people don't click that. But what we learned from media mix modeling is that this format is really, really effective. I'm not surprised as a marketer that it's effective, because I'm consuming podcasts every day, but it doesn't show up in the measurement that we have. So one of the things I found really powerful as well to validate my hypothesis around the marketing mix that we should deploy is consumption reports. So like, here building, this is my target audience, this is who they are, and then getting a consumption report, where did they spend the time and so on. And the thing, as B2B has evolved a lot over the years from being a very boring place to work to being, it's probably more exciting now, in my opinion, than B2C. We're targeting people, not companies, and people make decisions within these companies. So I think that's really important, that like, when you think about your marketing mix, you have to almost like think beyond what you can measure as well.
Yeah, no, it's actually very interesting. I totally agree, because I was looking at some research and I know LinkedIn had done kind of collaborations on the B2B Institute with the Ehrenberg
Mm.
Bass Institute and the kind of research they're doing down there in Australia in terms of what they're doing. And one of the theories that they've developed down in that institute is the 95-5 rule, in terms of, the assumption that 95% of a B2B audience isn't in market at this given time. And of course, you can't take anything as pure fact. It's not going to be exactly 95% when everyone measures it for their company, but it's to kind of highlight that the vast majority of people aren't in market for your technology solution right now. They might be in with a potential vendor right now, and they have that agreement in place, and they mightn't have the budget, etc. So like, they're not able to buy, even though we'd like to think in the ideal world that we put our marketing messaging out there and yes, it's class, they're going to buy it right now.
Mm.
And then we're kind of left at the end of the month saying we didn't hit our mark here, we don't know what's going on. But that's where the content piece comes in, is that you're trying to educate and build trust with those people now, so over the next few months they're shaping buying decisions within their B2B buying committees, etc. I think that's the really interesting part, and I think there's a huge market for, if you can start to make sense of what doesn't make sense, that we can't track, that it's invisible
Mm.
to us in the buyer journey. I think that would be really interesting as that develops, that we can start putting a kind of a place, starting off with what you were mentioning there in terms of the mixed modeling, on what roles other parts of marketing play in getting people to, let's say, that demo stage, and start to actually attribute true business success and growth through content marketing. And there's obviously some great tools out there now that can do it, but I think there's a way bigger industry in that whole measurement of content and tracking people as they go through a buyer's journey, obviously with a
100%. And
compliant
just on that too,
approach.
Jack, like the people, and I was guilty of this too for years, like, oh, if someone downloads content A, oh, we should now definitely give them content B and content C and so on. Like, to your point, like, only 5% of people want to engage in a journey right now. And the rest of the people, we just need to educate and engage. And one of LinkedIn's, I suppose, how our strategy has evolved over the last number of years actually has been, we've moved away from content leads. Like, no, all content is mainly ungated, because we want to give value to our prospects and customers. And when they're ready to buy, we'll make it easy for them. We're here. And that's changed how we go to market. We're no longer chasing leads that never went anywhere, and now we're focused on leads that are going somewhere. And I think that's a way to respect the 95% rule.
For smaller SaaS startups, tech
Mm.
companies, obviously revenue is number one for them. You know, they need to see revenue come in, and it can be hard to have that conversation where you're like, you need to play the long game, you know. But they're like, their runway mightn't be that long because of the situation of the market and different areas like that. And I think the thing to come back to is that you can have both. You know, that's, you know, there's the
Yeah.
5%, and that's conversion focused marketing, and you know, identify who they are, and by all means market to them, convert it. Not saying totally forget about them, you know, make your revenue there right now. But there's so much you can do on the other side of it to make sure that you have the pipeline and quality leads coming in 6 months from now, 12 months from now. That also needs to be looked at. And I think maybe, you know, 5, 10 years ago, from what I've read or from what I've seen, is that it was very conversion focused only. And it's only in the last few years we're opening
Mm.
up our kind of minds to the whole content thing, and people are kind of saying, oh, maybe we should be investing in that, or that there might be an ROI on that. So I think it's a really interesting space for the whole industry, really. Like you mentioned, there's some exciting stuff happening in B2B marketing. You know, like people are winning awards at the Cannes, you know, the marketing festival down in Cannes. Like people are pushing the boundaries on what B2B marketing ads look like, what content looks like. And I'd love to get your thoughts on that, actually, in terms of, you've seen B2B marketing now for you know, the last kind of 15 or so years. How have you seen it, you know, change from those days in Clonakilty to being at a global company, you know, leading global teams in B2B marketing? How have you seen that change? And
Yeah, I think it's evolved quite a lot. When I started working in PGI, I remember working on a white paper, and it was actually like a white paper in the sense of it was text. There might have been a couple of graphs in it, but it was like text in maybe 10 pages of text, heavy content for IT decision makers. And it was, you know, since we've realized that buyers are people now as well, and that's totally changed. And people want different ways to consume content, like podcasts, like, you know, webinars, like meet face to face events, and so on. So much more modern ways to engage, and that's definitely been a big change. To your point there about it's I'm going to use an analogy. Like for a long time, we were in a 5K mode. You know, let's chase MQLs, short term MQLs, and let's chase short term wins with short term channels such as search engine marketing, such as bottom of funnel campaigns on channels, and so on. And you know, people need to approach a marathon perspective. And not only are there multiple buyers in B2B, and probably more complex than ever now, than ever before. But you also have multiple sellers as well, in the sense of, you know, one of the reasons I like B2B is that we're a team. You know, if you think about it, marketing, your brand team, your agency, your demand team, all the product team, you have your sales team, you have your customer service team, your onboarding team, and you're all in this together to try to acquire or support the customer. And it's evolved to being more of a team event, and that's why I'm kind of going with the marathon analogy, in the sense that maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was convinced by my team to start investing in SEO a lot more. Now, you know, I had some targets for return on investment every single year, and I could invest it in search engine marketing and other channels, or I could invest it in SEO. And from history, I didn't see a return in SEO that much. So now the team were very good, and they convinced me. And we started investing in SEO. And like this time last year, we recorded a 17x return over 3 years. That's just, you know, insane. And the beauty about playing that long-term game, that marathon game, is that that content now is still contributing today. Whereas that Facebook ad or that YouTube ad that we invested in 3 years ago, that's gone. You know, so that's what I think. Like thinking long term, but to your point, you also need to have the short term tactics as well to capture in your revenue. But you definitely need to think that.
whether it's in content marketing or just effectiveness of B2B marketing, where do you see that going in the future?
To be honest with you, I don't know, because I think it's evolving every single day. I will think like a lot of people right now around the SEO, people are saying, "Oh, we need to pivot really fast to FAQ content and this kind of stuff." Yes, that is probably true. But are we going to be doing FAQ content this time next year, 2 years time? Probably not. So I don't know where we're going to net out. You know, we also see every company building their own agent on their own website at the moment. I don't see that being a thing in maybe in a few years' time, or if it is, it might look very, very different. I do see how people buy evolving has changed, and that's based on my own behavior. And I give you an example is that I'm not sure about you, but have you ever been on a sales pitch with a sales rep and you've gone to their website, you've downloaded some content probably, you've seen some ads, you might have gone to a webinar, you finally fill out the contact us form, you get sent stuff from the rep in advance of the call, and then they go into the slide one of the call. The company is called X and we do Y and here's what we do. And it's like, I want the price. Will you give me the price? And I feel like now with AI, people are skipping that even faster because they're going to, their large language models and asking them, I want to buy this tool. Which ones are in the market? Okay, from these, which ones do you recommend based on my company and on my requirements? And then they want the price. I think the sales cycles are going to change drastically. Probably get shorter in many respects. I hope they do. And then I think companies need to be be in a position to kind of support that and move away from these long sales cycles to being very much a case of moving with the market. I think that's going to be a change in the future.
I was on a recent podcast and we were chatting about this as well in terms of how do you make sure that your company is, coming up in those questions in the LLMs and when people are going to ChatGPT or Perplexity or Claude or wherever they're searching and they're putting in and they're B2B buyers in that scenario and they're, sales mindset on, they're into awareness. They have a few people maybe that they've considered, but they're checking it out and fact checking it. Like the role of content and how you firstly measure that, but also optimize the content you're creating across your socials, YouTube, your website to make it as easy as possible. And what is the AI taking in terms of, is it a title? Is it the actual text? Is it images, videos? Is it a combination of all of them? So that when your ideal prospect is searching, what are the top, bookkeeping software solutions out there, that like it's putting your information and showing it back to the user and saying, this is the source and this is the top company. I think that would be a really interesting space for marketers to go into.
Yeah, and I think right now everyone is scrambling, trying to catch up, but the finish line keeps changing, and that's the problem right now. And I think, but hopefully it will evolve to something really cool. I think, but I just don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, I suppose just stay adaptable, stay agile, and keep learning, and just never rest on your laurels. I suppose is the way to
Yeah,
to
I
make
actually
sure.
I started a AI course a couple of weeks ago actually, and it's just AI course on marketing, and it's just the way the ideas that can be deployed that I didn't even think of are just incredible. And I think yeah, it's moving so fast. It's exciting, and marketers really need to. It's a unique tool for them to use, and a lot of the things I talked about earlier about having a very clear strategy, knowing your customer, knowing what value you can give them. There's AI. You should be using AI for that. And I think when I talk to people about AI in marketing, they always think using AI for content creation. And yeah, you can do that. But what I'm referring to really is like, using AI to understand your customer better, learning, asking AI about your competitors and looking for differentiators between you and your competitors and so on, understanding the market. And there are things that, you can do. I mentioned earlier, but like on just contextualizing your results, why can't you put your results into a model and ask it like to add more context? These are results I'm seeing in the market, but are the macroeconomic challenges correlating to this, or are they different? Using AI as a tool as opposed to just a content generator.
I think that's a really interesting way of kind of viewing it as well, because I was at a conference recently as well, and I was speaking to you about before we started recording, and they were really in the weeds of building the actual architecture and the systems that we're all going to be using. They were at the other side of it, but even the guardrails that they're putting up to make sure you're getting the best responses from the large language models, and that we're only seeing a fraction of it from the content generation piece in terms of the functionality of AI that people aren't looking that step kind of further of what the actual capability of the technology is and the power that it can actually have, that it's not just a good thing for writing the odd LinkedIn post here or the odd newsletter copy there. We don't even know the capabilities of it yet because they're still kind of discovering them and improving them week on week. And I think that's a really interesting part of how you embed it, and that, maybe it might mean smaller teams, but it means that you're doing a lot more, and maybe you'll have more time to do things you actually enjoy doing besides the kind of daily manual tasks that won't be necessary in 5 or 10 years time. You'll be working on something different.
Yeah, I actually got a book last weekend from my lecturer, and it was 600 prompts for marketers. And they're very specific, like, give me a market analysis of this company. And so, like, very specific ones you can deploy for your company and who you work for your clients. But you still need to understand the output. So while these will help you to do an SEO audit, you still need to be able to understand the SEO audit to implement it. And that's where I think hopefully our jobs are okay for a while.
That was actually a topic that they spoke about, and I think they spoke about it at Dublin Tech Summit too this year, where they were kind of going on the whole area of like hallucination. So like it takes
Mm.
someone to actually understand what they're asking, and actually the data in the first place has to be good that you're putting in there, because like if you give bad data, which is a whole different topic for another day. But if you are giving poor data, unreliable data, then the output is going to be poor, unreliable results, because the input has been bad, and you can't make good from bad essentially. But they were saying the hallucination part as well, and that as marketers, as people using these platforms, that we need to question the responses we're getting from the AI models
Mm.
and not just take it off face value. And they quoted some law. I can't remember the actual name of the law, but like they put up some stats saying that Cork has the biggest density of tech startups with 97.3%, and they had
I
4 out
believe
of every
that, yeah.
100. You look at it and we're all just there
Mm.
nodding away like, yeah, that actually sounds right, I can't believe it. And we're all here in Cork like, and we're loving it, and we're like,
Yeah.
yes. And then he's like, it's a lie, like it does hallucinate, like it does. The AI,
Yeah.
I don't know what model he was using for that example, but he said that like they just made it up, so it's like
Mm.
that careful point of it as well, because even from a security point of view, the messages, you're the gatekeepers of the messages essentially for the company. One wrong step can be catastrophic. And we've seen many examples of AI, and not just AI, but other examples of wrong messaging or wrong actions being taken. And, it just takes a second to destroy a company reputation that takes years to build. And then, it's not much good to you then. So I think people do play a huge role in working with the technology to make
Mm.
sure it works in your best interest. Or if you could kind of sum up the most valuable lesson, maybe, Garo, that you've learned from your career so far in B2B marketing, is there any kind of like one standout lesson or principle that you take with you?
I think prioritization, I mentioned it earlier, but there is so much to do. If you work in marketing and you're a creative person, there is an endless amount of things you want to spend your time on. And but prioritization is really, really important. And that goes back into have like spend your time on your strategy. What are the key things? Like, where's the product market fit? Who are we targeting? What do they need from us? What's the value we can give them? And focus on that, because I think there's so much distractions out there. When I look back to my time, my career, I'm very proud of everything I've done, but there's some things I feel like, I should have had more focus on that, or I could have prioritized better. And it doesn't come back to prioritization; it comes back to deprioritization. Because if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority. So there's a really good marketer, Andrew Manu. You should follow him on LinkedIn. Very good at like just really insightful. He ingrained in me at LinkedIn for a long time about deprioritization and using PMATs to prioritize, and it's so important.
If you could share one advice with either the company or the marketer, what 1% insight would you share with them in terms of, effectively marketing to their markets?
I'm going to go really tactical here and say always be testing, because you say 1%, but I'm going to give you back a number of 3%. And the reason I'm saying 3% is that I would have always advocating for lots of testing. I actually used to do a roadshow called John Snow, You Know Nothing, whereby we would showcase prospects and customers different tests that we ran in our marketing, and then ask them to pick the result, which one they thought would win. And normally it's 50-50, because you need to always test and validate and test and validate. And we did another thing too called the LinkedIn secret sauce, whereby we took all the tests that we did and we publish them for our customers, which are marketers effectively. And that's kind of a really good way of using our own what we're doing as a content platform for our customers. But I mentioned 3% because some of my team last year were seeing like, you know, the marketing qualified lead to opportunity is normally high volume, low quality in marketing qualified leads. But by one simple change in the landing page, this incredible marketer, Michelle Chang, was able to improve the conversion rate from 3% to 6%, effectively doubling the revenue overnight by one simple test. So I really essentially recommend always be testing and test every single thing if you can.
Yeah, there is endless capabilities now for
Mm.
even smaller teams listening to this. If you have 2 or 3 in your team, you don't need to have the global budget behind you. You can, you can get smart, you can be agile, you can use these tools that are readily available, and start testing and start making use of them. Best book for B2B technology marketers.
Staying on team, humanizing B2B. But I would recommend, I think Paul Cash wrote that, but there's a newsletter I subscribe to called from Growth Hackers. It's my go-to every week. I recommend that.
Company that is doing great B2B tech marketing now that you admire.
HubSpot. I've always admired them, but they've reinvented themselves recently with the rebrand, and they have this new series called Masters, which is a pretty good kind of insight from an expert in the marketing world every week.
Cool. And then finally, if you weren't in marketing, what would you be doing?
I would have a pub somewhere in West Cork with the fireplace on and live music in the corner. I used to work in pubs in college and I loved it. So
That'd be good crack. I think that's probably the best, one of the best responses I'll get, specific
yeah.
to West Cork on this podcast. So that was fantastic. Gearoid, I'd like to thank you for your time today. It was fantastic. Thank you for sharing your 1% insights with our listeners. Where can they find you online?
On LinkedIn, Gearoid Buckley.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for your time today, Gearoid.
Thank you, Jack.